You're listening to The Big Album Show with Paul Dillon and Dan O'Neill.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Big Album Show with me, Paul.
And me, Dan.
On this edition, we are discussing the amazing, the legendary, the one and only Revolver from 1966, the classic Beatles record. And we're absolutely delighted to have a very, very special guest join us on this pod. It's Professor Luke O'Neill from Trinity College, and you're very welcome back on The Big Album Show, Luke. Thanks
very much, Paul. I can't wait. This is one of my all-time favorite albums, obviously. So I was beside myself when you suggested this one. So it's superb.
Well, it's great to have you back.
Tell me, Luke, can you remember, take yourself back, 20 years or so, and tell me, can you remember the first time you ever heard the Beatles?
Oh, God, I can, Dan. I was 4 years of age, right? It was 1968. That's how old I am. And Yellow Submarine had come out, actually. And I remember vividly hearing Yellow Submarine in 1968. Now, as we know, guys, it was on Revolver in 1966. But the album Yellow Submarine with the movie came out. And I remember as a 4-year-old dancing around my kitchen at home singing Yellow Submarine. So that's my first memory of. So I'm old enough to be alive when the Beatles were still together, lads. Unlike you two, you see. So that's my claim to fame, I was only 4 now, mind you. But I still remember that Yellow Submarine very vividly, I must say.
And what is it about the Beatles that you love? Like, I know that's a really, really difficult question, given they are the greatest band ever. But what can you put your finger on it, on what it is to you that makes the Beatles stand out?
That's difficult. I mean, since the age of 4, I've heard them. I suppose it starts with me as a small child. And then my sister, who's 8 years older than me, she lots of the albums and she would listen to them, and my dad loved them. So I was kind of set up for it from a very early age, is the first thing I would say. But to me, I think there was an album called Oldies But Goldies, which is kind of a greatest hits compilation that came out in 1966, apparently. And we had that in the 70s in my house in Bray. And then we also had the Red and the Blue albums. I remember that they were greatest hits as well. And I remember as an 8-year-old playing them. Can you imagine, on the turntable in those days? And to me, it was joy. It's a single word. There's such joy in the music. I mean, when you hear their vocals, when you hear the sheer pleasure of what they're doing themselves, that's what resonates, I think. And I reckon that's why kids love the Beatles, by the way. They can sense this joy off the music. And obviously there's some slower, sad songs as well. But overall, if you hear She Loves You, or I Want to Hold Your Hand, or A Hard Day's Night, the one word is pure joy in those songs, really. And I guess we all like a bit of joy, don't we? So to me, that was the beginning of the whole love affair, in a sense. This joyous musicality really was the reason I got into them in the first place.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the Beatles is they're so they're such a large cultural phenomenon that it's kind of almost impossible if you weren't around before the Beatles, which none of us were really, to imagine a world without their music. It's kind of like trying to imagine popular culture without Mickey Mouse or
it is
or the pandemic without Luke O'Neill. I mean,
well, now hang on a minute, hold on a second. Hopefully that's the case now. But no, you're right. I mean, they have been dominant. Now, for me, another great phrase that's been said lots of times was, for once, the most popular were the best. You don't often get that. Very often, the most popular aren't the best, or the best are not the most popular. And yet the Beatles managed to be really, really popular, and yet the best. And there's no denying that, And because that annoys people. Like, I remember in the 70s that the punks kicked against them, because why wouldn't you? Like, obviously you're a young guy. To hell with those old guys. They're so yesterday, But the fact is, the range of the Beatles is incredible, The range of musicality and different styles and so on. They're impossible to beat, really, And even now, I mean, when I play an album, as I've done for tonight, played Revolver, it's compelling stuff. You can't get away from it. It's the diversity, it's the musicality, it's the harmonies, the rhythms. It's all. I think they managed to fuse kind of rock and roll and blues with music hall and folk into one new amalgam in a way, And therefore, anybody who likes Western music in the broadest sense has to love them. You can't deny them in that way.
Yeah, I'm always really suspicious about anyone who says that they don't like the Beatles. I find it hard to believe.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I guess you want that as well, don't you? In a sense. I mean, if we all love the same thing, there's no innovation.
True.
It's okay to react against them as well. But ultimately, everybody comes back to them. And even the ones who say they hate them in their, say, teens, when they're in their 30s and listen properly, They can't deny it. They can't deny the majesty and the wonder of it in a sense. So it's a tough one, isn't it? Because pop music should be moving forward. What gets me at the moment is pop music is stuck in a way because there was massive innovation. Rap may have been the last big innovation, for example. Since then, it's been very hard to innovate because there's still guitars, drums, keyboard, vocals, harmonies, verses and choruses and so on. And if the Beatles kind of captured that and kind of dominated that, it's very hard to beat them in that sense. So for new bands today, it's really difficult. And many new bands are fans of the Beatles because they know they were the maestros, if you will. So it's in a tricky time in many ways, I think.
This is it. Everything has been done. There's nothing left to invent.
I know. Yeah, that's the challenge.
The end
really,
of history.
Yeah.
It's fascinating what you said in terms of the punk rock response to the Beatles. I mean, one of the things I've been saying to Dan, and Dan has been saying to me, is that every generation rediscovers the Beatles, and you know, they are the ever-present force in music since they reigned. But during the punk period, of course, there was this kickback, and remember the famous line in London Calling when the amazing Joe Strummer said, "Phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust."
Yeah.
I mean, we all heard it. I mean, I heard it again sometime after that album was released, but it was that stuff is old. We don't want that. They're old. And I mean, they wouldn't have been even 40. They would have been younger than I am now. So very young in terms of how we view people, maybe. But anyway, it is fascinating. Every generation finds them. And for me, the remarkable thing about this record, and you said it there, Luke, is the joy.
Yeah.
The songs are short. They're very easy.
Yeah.
A song like Yellow Submarine is a really popular one with kids. And it's one of those songs, as soon as you hear it once, you won't forget it. And it's like if anyone is familiar with sort of the children's cartoon songs, it wouldn't sit out of place on any of those kind of children's cartoons. Yeah.
Well, the question is, and how could the same band produce a song like Yellow Submarine and Tomorrow Never Knows on the same album? I mean, it's just remarkable range, isn't it? You know,
incredible.
So different, such a different emphasis, and yet they achieve that. So in many ways, for me, it's diversity as well in the music. It's massively diverse. Now, of the Rolling Stones, of course, we do, but that was one type of music, really. The Stones tried to be a bit different here and there, you know, but they'd nowhere near the same range as the Beatles. What the Stones had, of course, though, was great soul, though, and great sort of passion, didn't they? You know, but that range of musical styles is absolutely remarkable with the Beatles music, and no band has ever done that. I mean, Queen, in my opinion, kind of come close to it, because again, they've got a big range as well of different styles. You know? But the Beatles were the first to have that huge diversity in their music, and Revolver really captures that.
You mentioned the Stones there. I asked my little daughter today, Beatles or Stones, and she turned around to me and she said, "Daddy, can we not have something normal for dinner today?"
Yes.
But no, what you say about the diversity is really, really interesting, because if you think about the time frame during which the Beatles existed, you have 1963, they release Please Please Me. It starts off, the first track on it is I Saw Her Standing There. It starts off with your classic 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the Beatles' career, as in the limelight begins. I know they were in Hamburg and so on before that. This album, only 3 years later, is completely different. Also, by the way, starts with a kind of a count in. I think it's George Harrison counting quite slowly and off time. Actually, it doesn't go with the first track. But how on earth did they manage to take that journey between 1963 and 1966? It's incredible.
No, it is remarkable. Then some music critic said, if you'd gone into jail in 1964, right, and didn't hear music at all in the 2 years, came out in 66, and if you heard Bob Dylan actually as well, Beatles, you know, what has happened in that 2 years? It's like aliens have landed on Earth, you know, and they're the ones playing the music. Like, again, Tomorrow Never Knows is a good example. Imagine playing that in 1966, having the last thing you heard was in 64. You go, how could that have happened? How could there be such a change in music in that time, you know? And it's a really good question that how do they achieve that? I think what happened was, and there's various opinions on this. First of all, there was 4 of them, remember, and George Martin. There was a whole gang of them. And they could feed off each other and exchange ideas. And they realized, I think in 65, they'd kind of climbed the mountain in many ways. and achieve so much, and they were desperate to do something different themselves because they got a bit bored or they wanted to do something. To me, it's like being a scientist, to be honest. Innovation is everything to us. We got to keep making new discoveries, otherwise we're not happy. And musically, they must have like, let's try something different. And of course, Revolver is all about that. It's different sounds, different sound effects in the studio. And they must have had a terrible unease about them in a way, and dissatisfaction, I think. They couldn't keep recording Love Me Do, could they?
No.
That bore them to tears. So they must have had a huge desire to move music on themselves. And if you listen to the interviews from John Lennon and Harrison at the time, they were saying we must do something new. And I reckon it's a short attention span.
Yeah.
That was part of it. And to satisfy themselves, they had to be innovative. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do it, in a sense, or wouldn't have had the motivation to do it. So to me, I think it's all about trying something new because you've done it already, you see. And survive then and be interested. They must have suffered from boredom. That I mean, can you imagine like cover bands play the same stuff night after night? The Beatles got sick playing their own stuff,
Yeah.
Oh, let's try something brand new, and then they were driven to this innovation, I guess, is the way to think.
And you said an interesting thing there about it being like science, and in terms of needing to innovate all the time. I think another element to the Beatles story, and it's actually you can say the same about people like Sinatra and so on as well, that these acts appeared on the cusp of vast innovation in technology. So the reason why the crooners, for instance, if we go back to Sinatra and so on, were able to sing the way they did, it was because there was the invention of the microphone, and they no longer had to project their voice all the way down the back of a concert hall. Likewise, the Beatles, in the likes of Rubber Soul and Revolver, they had access to this new technology that was never used before. For instance, on this album, you had the creation of artificial double tracking. It was the first time it was ever used. The Beatles sound engineers were the first sound engineers, I believe, to create effects like chorus, which is now used all over sound engineering. So it also went hand in hand with innovation in technology, innovation in media, innovation in people's access to media, even the television and so on, and became more widespread. So that surely played a role in it as well, I suppose.
It did. And remember, you're dead right, I mean, remember, nowadays it's hard to innovate. But back then, everything was moving very fast. The arts scene was changing huge. It was the 60s, for God's sake, And the Beatles living in London were part of this, And they're absorbing all these influences to do with the arts at every level, painting, drama. Everything was in a frenzy at that time. And the Beatles could absorb that then and then do their thing, which was music. So it was a very fertile period for trying out new things, I guess. And you're right, Dan, they were after new sounds because they realized we can't just have a lead guitar, rhythm, bass drums. That's a bit boring, And they told the engineers, give us new sounds, give us new ways of recording, or give us new ways of processing the recording. And remember, famously on Rubber Soul or on Revolver, is the backward tape thing. They even, I think I read somewhere like Harrison, that one was play that backwards. Let's hear it backwards. Can you imagine saying that to the producer? And they build it in then as lots of backward tapes and some of that. And again, that was this desire to create something new that mightn't have been better necessarily, but certainly would have been exciting, and hopefully would turn out to be something very innovative and possibly better than what went before. And because we can discuss that, I mean, the strange thing is, Love Me Do is still a great song, remember. And just because Tomorrow Never Knows comes out doesn't take away from that song. So the new stuff didn't mean it was better. It just meant it was different and still sounded great, and still was very stimulating to the listening audience.
I think you've brought us on nicely to choosing our favorite tracks. So I'm going to go first. I would probably say, and this is quite difficult to do on an album like Revolver, to take 3 tracks, but I would go with Eleanor Rigby, number 1 for me, Yellow Submarine, number 2, and Got to Get You Into My Life, number 3. And I'll talk about those in reverse order. I mean, Got to Get You Into My Life. I think the reason why I've chosen it, and the reason why I think it's so fascinating as a track, is that I genuinely believe it could be released tomorrow and still sound contemporary and fresh. And that is just a remarkable tribute to them. And is there any other band that could do that? Is there any other group that could do that? So I mean, in that sense, and just musically, it's just so innovative and so interesting. And again, it's just great joy in it. And I think I heard someone recently say about Paul McCartney that he's an incredibly joyous person. You know, he believes
Yeah.
in dreams. He's hippie-ish almost, and you know, I think you can really hear that in that song.
Yeah.
Number two for me is Yellow Submarine, for the reasons that you've already said, Luke. I mean, the you know the, how children pick up on that song, how we all knew that song as a child, how you knew that as a 4-year-old. I would have been aware. I can't ever remember a time when I wasn't aware of that song.
Yeah.
And you know, isn't that just an incredible achievement to be able to do that? And in a sense of, I mean, it is genius. That word is often associated with the Beatles, and of course the vocal. We can't forget the vocal. Ringo Starr's
Got all
vocal.
Ringo. Yeah, that's right.
And then for me, number one is Eleanor Rigby. And I mean, again, it could be any track off the album, but the reason I've chosen that is because I find it a very good example of, it's an obvious point to make, but just how influential the Beatles are, because you can turn on the radio at any time of day. And if you turn to any more classic radio stations, your classic FMs, your Novas, all those type of radio station, and you're going to hear songs from the 70s, 80s, 90s, right up until now, that you can that sound like this record and sound like a track like Eleanor Rigby. Almost every band during the Britpop period had a song like Eleanor Rigby. And it's just a beautiful tune, lovely lyrics. And for me, it gets my number one. Do you want to go next, Dan?
Okay, yeah, they're really interesting songs to pick. And as you mentioned, you know, you could pick any song off this album, really. So in that vein, I'm going to pick 3 different songs just because I can. So one of them that I love is And Your Bird Can Sing. I think it's like Lennon hated the song, and I don't understand why, because it's upbeat, it's fun, it's actually so fun that if you listen to the anthology version of the song, which I recommend people do, you can't help but laugh, because McCartney and Lennon literally laugh all the way through the
Yeah,
tape.
they're hysterics, don't they?
Yeah, whatever was going around in the studio that day
Yeah.
was strong stuff, because they really can't contain themselves. I'm sure it was just joy. But it's an amazing song, and the guitar on it, it's Harrison and McCartney playing the lead guitar on it, and they play in harmony with each other. It's like a kind of a proto Thin Lizzy vibe, and the melody is fantastic. And there's loads of different theories about what the song's about. So some people say it's about Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull. Other people say it's about Sinatra. And my favourite take on it was from Cynthia Lennon, John Lennon's first wife, who said that she gave him a present of a clockwork bird inside a gilded cage, and it was wrapped up, and as she was giving it to him, she wound it up so it played music as he opened the package. And you know, you can look at that as a bird in a gilded cage and so on, as being a metaphor for his first marriage, and the lines, "You don't get me," and so on. So that resonates with me. I think there could be something in that, but we don't know. Lennon always kind of mixed things up and put out different versions of songs. And another one I like is I'm actually picking all Lennon songs, which is unusual because I love McCartney equally as much. But She Said is a great song. McCartney didn't actually play on this track because he had a little falling out with them. So you have Harrison on bass in this song. I think it's a great example of a song where Ringo's drumming really comes to the fore. I think Ringo was going through a great period during the recording of this album because, of course, you know, Rain, which isn't on the album, was a B-side to Paperback Writer, also has fantastic drums on that track. So he was really going through a good period. And then the other one I'm going to pick is Tomorrow Never Knows. I think it's revolutionary. I think it sounds like a 90s song from like the Chemical Brothers emulated that sound in the 1990s when they did those few tracks with Noel Gallagher. And if you listen to, you know, Tomorrow Never Knows beside Let Forever Be by the Chemical Brothers, they sound almost identical. There's I won't say plagiarism afoot, but they're very, very similar. And it just shows you how revolutionary it was, you know, to have sampling in pop music. I'm sure kind of avant-garde musicians had done it before the Beatles, but the Beatles were definitely the first popular band who brought that kind of sampling into their music. So it's a really, 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 really interesting song. What about you, Luke? What would you pick?
You see, lads, it's very difficult now, isn't it? Every song is fantastic, in my opinion, on this album. There's not a single filler, you know. And remember, if we want to talk about Rubber Soul, that was the first album with no fillers, and that revolutionized albums. They made sure every single track had to be brilliant, you know. And Revolver is the natural successor to that. So every song is superb, you know. If I'm forced to, just to make it slightly different to you two, I guess, I'd have number 3 be Dr. Robert for me, because I'm medical, first of all, you see, that's the first reason. And just the rhythm on the guitar is incredible, you know. And it's about a doctor friend of Lennon's in New York who would prescribe anything. You know, there was a famous doctor in New York who would, whatever you need speed, yeah, he'd write a script for you, this thing, you know. And like, well, you're feeling fine. The way the chorus chimes out is superb. And so, again, so weird. And the harmony on that is a brilliant one. So that'd be my number 3. Number 2 has to be Here, There, and Everywhere. I'm devastated you guys didn't pick that one. That is one of McCartney's best songs by far. And Lennon himself said it was his favorite Paul McCartney song. And it's a beautiful, wonderful love song, isn't it? The melody, the way it ascends, you know, the backing vocals, you know, and then the middle bit, I want her everywhere. And if she's beside me, I know. I mean, it's just universal. It's a great song of love, let's face it, you know. And that's why that's my number 2, because it just captures what it is to be in love, and the musicality again, those chord changes. It's remarkable as a song, and the harmonies, and they're all at their best. Even though Ringo wouldn't be that prominent, obviously, because it isn't much of a drum beat, but they're at their best. All the 3 of them harmonizing and singing, that is superb. But number 1 has to be the same as you, Dan. Tomorrow Never Knows. And in my opinion, that is one of the Beatles' most important songs, because first of all, it's wild as hell, like, you know, and the story of it is great. So Lennon turns up in the studio. It was the first song they recorded, by the way, for the album, apparently. And Lennon turns up and he says to George Martin and Paul, I've got a new song. And he sits down and he gets his guitar, and it's just a C chord. It doesn't change. Turn off your mind, relax. The whole song is in C. Like, and he finishes and they go, what the hell is this? there's no chord changes. And it's a monotone. You know? And Lennon's so confident. I want this, he says. I really want to record this song. Now, to me, that shows the confidence of John Lennon. It's not a pop song. It's not a rock song. It's so out there. Nothing like it before had ever been attempted. And of course, it was Lennon's absorption of Indian music, you see, as you know. I mean, Harrison was the big influence on him there, and he made an Indian song. In his mind, he said all these monks chanting on a hillside is the sound he wants to create. So talk about like just completely out there and totally wild. And then of course he asks George Martin to create that sound, and Martin struggles to create 1,000 monks chanting. And then you get the funny feedback loops. I think what happened there was, McCartney went home one night and played something backwards, and that becomes this strange chirping noise. Because remember, McCartney was as avant-garde as Lennon. People forget that. McCartney was hanging out with all the great artists and all the rest. So he introduced that backward tape loop. And then most importantly, as you both know, the lyric is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I mean, for crying out loud, how can a pop band use the Tibetan Book of the Dead as their source of lyrics? There's no mention of love. There's no mention of all the usual things that pop songs are about. And I love it as well, Dan. Like, he orders you, turn off your mind, relax and float. Talk about a directive from on high, you know, it is not dying, you know. And the last verse, you know, all play the game existence to the end of the beginning. I mean, here we have deep Eastern philosophy as well tied up in a song. So for me, I've always taken that song with me all my life, actually, as a kind of a philosophical version of the absurdity of existence, the whole meaninglessness of life. It's a strange thing, you know, and I just think it's just superb. And Lennon's voice, of course, talk about stepping up to the microphone and singing this lyric in such a clear sort of a way that's so compelling. So no, to me, Tomorrow Never Knows has to be the standard. And of course, they were stuck. It was the first song they recorded, right? And then where do you put it on the album? You can't put it in the middle or at the start. It had to be the last track, didn't it? And many people think the 60s began with that song, actually, because that was like a clarion call to the whole world. Things have changed. We're not singing Love Me Do anymore. We're not singing, Elvis, whatever it might be. This is a whole new beginning for the arts. And in fact, to me as well, it is the the trumpet that sounds the shift in the artistic movement in the 60s as well is announced by that song too. So for all those reasons, as you've gathered, it has to be my number one off the album.
Wow.
It's such a great insight into the song, and yeah, I love when you think about it. Lennon, as you say, kind of giving you these directives, these spiritual directives. It's all the more interesting when you put it into the context of the time. The previous month before this was released, Lennon was in Big Dog's Doo-Doo in the United States for the whole
Bigger Than Jesus
thing, you know.
But again, that shows the confidence of the man. I mean, he defies that hatred and records a song that's effectively about Eastern religion, really, you know, and it's incredible confidence in the man. You know, what gets me is his leadership. And Lennon emerges as a leader of the 60s, partly through that song. And that great line, you know, lay down all thoughts, surrender to the void. That captures existential philosophy in a single line. You know, he's very good at capturing the zeitgeist, if you will, you see. So you're right, you're quite right, Dan. I forgot that fact that the controversy about Bigger Than Jesus had happened just before that. So again, you got to hand it to him. And Lennon's cool because he doesn't care, does he? You know, he's a true artist. He says, to hell with this. I'm going to do this. I want to do this as an artist. I don't care if people can't listen to it or it's not a pop song. It's not a rock song. I'm doing it because as an artist, I have to do it. He's compelled as an artist to express himself. I'm lucky enough to be in the biggest band in the world, of course, you know, at the time, you know. So to me, it captures the essence of Lennon is actually in that. And then never forget McCartney. McCartney was adding in all those sound effects. And Ringo's drumming, Dan, as you would agree. Can you imagine now Ringo Starr? He's a you know, 4 beats to the bar drummer from Hamburg and Liverpool, and he steps up and plays this fantastic backing track, unlike anything in drumming ever. That strange rhythm in that song. So you got to hand it to Ringo as well. And then George's influence through the Indians. So in many ways, Tomorrow Never Knows is the 4 of them together again at their best in a way, and that's why I think it's such an important song.
And have any of us picked out George's songs from the album just out of curiosity?
No, sadly we haven't done. Yeah. Taxman's a great song, isn't it? I would pick. They're all very. I mean, I would say there's 0.1% difference between these songs. By the way, they're all brilliant. And Taxman is a fantastic song.
It is, yeah.
Very innovative. It's very Indian, you know, and this very strange bass line that was unheard of before, you know. So again, you'd have to have Taxman up there.
It's a great way to start a record, isn't it, Taxman? It sets a great tone. It sets a great pace. Yeah. And a great way of bringing you into that world.
Yeah, exactly.
And the funny, like, you know, people often say this when they're talking about Helter Skelter, but McCartney is often seen as the kind of, you know, soft Beatle, the one who writes the little ditty on the piano. But the guitar solo in Taxman is McCartney, and it's just pure like rock and roll. Do you know what I mean? It's a brilliant guitar solo, like not overly complicated or anything, but the feels are real, you know. Yeah,
exactly. And it's got the Indian. I mean, remember, Dan, the Indian music was seen as really weird that time. Like there was no world music. And they're building in Indian rhythms in a very kind of a very out there way, which I'm sure George Martin said, don't do this because the audience won't like it because it's just Indian rhythms and Indian. Like the guitar solo in Taxman is quite Indian in a way, you know. And yet they said, no, and Harrison must have said, we have to do this. We have to build this into.
Yeah, big time. I was lucky enough once upon a time to meet George Martin.
Now we're talking.
it was incredible. So I'll tell you the story fast because I don't want to bore the listeners to death. But I when I was back in university, he visited UCD is where I went, and someone said to me, do you see? Well, I said to someone, I see George Martin is in the college tonight, and he goes, he's in that room. Do you want to come in and meet him? And I said, no way, right? So I was brought into this room, just thinking that George Martin would shake my hand and say, off you go. He turned to me and he said, sit down beside me. And I died. I didn't have a word to say. I like, what do you say to George Martin? You know, I like, oh, I like your stuff. You're a very good producer. You know, I couldn't think of a word to say. But he was absolutely kind and wonderful and so friendly. I wasn't disappointed whatsoever in meeting him. So there's my George Martin story.
Very good.
We have the quick fire round of questions I want to ask you, and tonight they're all Beatles themed, so we'll see how we get on. We've kind of we're sticking to the program tonight a bit more than the last time. So first question: red album or blue album?
Blue, it has to be, you see, because of all the depth, even though both are great. No, blue would be the. And I thought as well, Dan, George Martin and John Lennon. And here's a fact for you: it was Lennon and Martin that picked the tracks for the red and the blue. McCartney was pissed off or he was away or something, so the two of them picked those tracks, and it's a great selection, isn't it, from all these albums that we're talking about in a way. So no, it has to be blue.
Yeah. Then favorite Beatles song that doesn't get the attention it deserves?
Oh crikey, now there's a hard one. Yeah, favorite Beatles song that doesn't let me think for a second. Strangely, I would say Savoy Truffle on the White Album. There's one for you now. Because it's most unusual. Again, it's Harrison, and we don't have to mention him. Very strange lyrics about a box of chocolates, and the brass section is superb, and it really swings along. So there's one worth listening to, Savoy Truffle.
Quality. Your favorite album from a Beatle that wasn't with the Beatles, so solo or with Wings?
That's easy. That has to be Band on the Run.
Oh, yeah.
That's a country mile ahead of all the others. Sadly, even though I'm a Lennon fan, that album is as good as any Beatles album, Band on the Run. Again, the range is amazing on that. It's McCartney on his own. So no, Band on the Run, I think by popular consensus, will be the best solo album of them all, really.
Who was really the fifth Beatle?
Oh, well, apart from George Martin.
Yeah.
George, probably. Because without George Martin, they couldn't have done what they did. I mean, never forget that. And even though Lennon dissed him, you may know, Dan, Lennon's big controversial interview at Rolling Stone magazine 1970, he slags off Martin. And that was really bad. And eventually Martin was as you know, a gent. You met him, Dan. He was annoyed by this. And he met Lennon in 1976 or something. And Lennon was very apologetic. I was on drugs and I didn't mean it. But George, you were so important to us. Because George could take their ideas and turn them into like Eleanor Rigby is a great example. Martin wrote the strings for Eleanor Rigby. Without Martin, that couldn't have happened. So it has to be George Martin.
Okay. What's a horse's favorite Beatles song?
A horse's
It's Hey Jude.
Oh, now we're talking.
You like it?
Dan,
okay.
have you been smoking the wacky guys like the Beatles? That kind of question.
No comment. No. I
Hey
haven't.
Jude. Very good.
Okay, and then what's your least favorite Beatles song?
Oh, now that's another good question to ask. I think it has to be Blue Jay Way off Magical Mystery Tour. It drones on forever. And it's very boring, sadly, for Pearl George, So Blue Jay Way is one I never liked, really.
I might change your mind, right? There's a version of that someone has remixed, and it's the rapper DMX rapping over Blue Jay Way.
That can make it better then. Yeah,
check it out. It certainly lifts it up a notch, and you can grind to it.
Please don't be long. It's awful stuff. Maybe that's a better version. Yeah.
Check it out.
One of the things that we wanted to discuss with you now that you've been good enough to join us again on the pod, Luke, is the whole question of the relationship between the immune system and music.
Oh, thank you for asking that, Paul. It's not like a setup. I didn't. For the listeners, I didn't send them that question as a setup. Very important.
It's a very important one. And from a strictly scientific point of view, though, am I right in saying that a lot of science originates from alchemy, which was magic?
Yes, the origin of chemistry is alchemy for that.
Yeah.
And the alchemists began to use scientific methods eventually, actually.
Yeah.
Began measuring and using some of the science things that we know now. So there's no doubt alchemy was the start of the scientific revolution in some ways. Like even Isaac Newton was an alchemist, remember? He spent a long time trying to get the philosopher's stone to turn lead into gold, and he eventually realizes, oh no. So alchemy, I would view alchemy as a very important stepping stone on the way to what's real science, because they were doing their best at the time. They thought it was possible. And remember, the transmutation of things happens in nuclear physics anyway. So they weren't that far off. They didn't have the technology to do it. So no, I'd never knock the alchemists in a sense, because they were doing their best at the time.
And when it comes to the immune system and music, what is the science behind the relationship? If I listen to loads of good music, does that mean I won't get sick?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it so? It's like drinking loads of orange juice.
It's a perfect medicine. It's a perfect medicine. And you know why it is, Paul? Because we know scientifically, if you relax and if you're in a flow state, that's very beneficial for your health, but also for your immune system, no question. And the studies that have shown this, by the way. And the reason is because stress hormones, like cortisol, they're immunosuppressants. And music takes us out of ourselves, doesn't it? Like many things. It could be exercise, it could be reading. Music is such a relaxant, isn't it? And our minds go somewhere else. And we de-stress, and that's very good for your immune system. Because stress is a major negative for the immune response, it must be said. So that's why music is so good for us, and why our immune system, of all things, benefits hugely from music.
So the flow state,
yeah,
and music.
That's right.
How does that work?
Well, what is the flow state? The flow means you've lost yourself in something, right? And it could be anything. But when you listen to a great piece of music and you're in this sort of different, almost semi sort of aware state, and the brain wave patterns change, music induces that in many of us, you know? And that's a massive de-stressor. Cortisol levels fall, you know? So suddenly you're losing a negative influence in your body on the immune system by achieving flow. And if music induces flow, all the right things begin to happen. Now the immune system then can not get so stressed out, I suppose, is the way to think of it. So there's no doubt that music is a wonderfully beneficial thing to the immune system. And we know this because, like, in your bloodstream, that's where the immune system is, as you probably know, all the white blood cells. Cortisol is repressing it the whole time in the circulation. So if you lower cortisol, you're taking the brake off the immune system, and music will lower cortisol because it's a big de-stressor, is the way to think of it. There's no evidence that music is especially good at this. And anything that allows you to escape your worries and your cares and your concerns is going to be good for the immune system. And music is yet another example of that.
Right? And you've written extensively about this, Luke.
I have indeed. Yeah. I mean, I wrote about, I have a chapter, if I can plug my own book down, you don't mind. Dan's going to give out to me. So yeah, in my book, Immunology, I write about the benefits of music. And there's all kinds of benefits, basically. And one example is, Paul, choirs are great. If you're in a choir, it's very communal. We're a social species. So if we all sing together, you get a social bonding thing going on. You achieve flow because you love the music and you're concentrating on it. And there's loads of evidence that being in a choir makes you better, basically. It can stave off dementia. It can decrease stress. It can benefit your whole immune system through that. So I do write about that a lot because I'm being a muso. I love that chapter because I explain the scientifically proven beneficial effects of music are there to be seen.
It's fascinating. And I mean, I suppose when we discuss, you know, I mean, you're a voice that's absolutely now for many of us associated with the pandemic. I mean, you're associated with many other things as well, but we've come to know you even better the last couple of years. And I fear, not that I fear hearing you again in the media, but I fear there will be more of this pandemic. It's not quite over.
No, it's not. But I think we won't see a lockdown or kind of the disastrous things that happened really with this virus anyway. You know, I mean, if a new virus comes along, it might be different. But the good news is we have great immunity now to this virus.
Yeah,
it's vaccines and natural immunity combined. So even if a variant comes along or a slight difference happens, we'll still have good protection really. So I'm not worried about us going backwards. Let's put it that way. We might see some restrictions in the autumn, possibly, just to slow it down a bit if it starts to surge, but we're not going to have the same thing that we had in 2020 where the whole of the world had to stop with this virus anyway, And even more optimistically, Paul, I would say there's several vaccines in development that will work against any coronavirus. So in other words, if another one jumps from a bat again, and we might call it SARS-CoV-3, it's a new, coronavirus, these new vaccines should protect against those as well. So there's nothing to be too frightened of in that regard.
Have you managed to get to any gigs since things began to open up again?
Well, let me tell you, Dan, the Metabolics have played. We played the Trinity Ball. We did a gig ourselves last Friday.
Oh, brilliant!
We did a 30-minute set at the Trinity Ball. Now, of course, that was because I'm on the staff. They didn't pay me. So I got a cheap deal there, but no, we played for 30 minutes and we played one Beatles song. Amazingly, we do Come Together, and we also do Money, that song off Beatles. What was it with the Beatles? And we used to do back in the USSR, but we stopped singing that one like for obvious reasons. So that was, but no, we did a gig. And last gig I went to see Billy Bragg, amazingly, about maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Remember there was an opening at the time, and you couldn't go to gigs again. You remember that? And me and a mate of mine, I'm a big fan of Billy Bragg, so I got to see Billy. I haven't been to an actual gig since then, though. I'm looking forward to going back to more gigs again. I can't wait.
I was there, and in fact, I saw you in the bar.
I think you did. Actually, to be honest, that could have been after the last chat we had.
Yeah, we were there, and
just
it's funny.
That.
I've been to a few shows myself recently. Myself and Dan went to see Damon Albarn in the National Concert Hall.
Oh yeah, very good. Yeah.
And I was also at Christy Moore a couple of weeks ago in Vicar Street, and he was in remarkable form. But I think that I think many of us have come to see music in a different light in the last couple of years as well, haven't we? Because we can see the role that it plays and encouraging you to get through hard times, and also memory, the memories that you connect with music and what you can what you associate with music. I think
exactly
it's incredibly evocative and personal as well, can't it?
Huge, and nothing beats, Paul, as you would agree, being in a room with loads of people listening to a band. There's something magical happens there that you don't quite get at home with your Spotify.
Yeah, no, definitely,
of course, but if you go to a gig, there's something funny goes on communally. I think maybe if I was living in the Stone Age, I may have been a musician, because I couldn't have had any pipettes or microscopes, could I? I would have been compelled to sing songs around the campfire, maybe, because it does seem to be innately part of what we are as a species, this love of making music and listening to it, you see. So I guess I'm sure both agree. Like when I do play, I'm not a professional, but people love hearing live music. I mean, there's something special happens with a live audience. They love you for it, because you're kind of giving something to them. They're giving something back. It's a wonderful relationship between the musician and the audience, in a sense. Something very special happens. And you're right, through the pandemic, we lost that for 2 years. There was a terrible denial of a basic, never in human history, probably, did we not have live music for fellow human beings. Even back in the Stone Age, around the campfire, we had it, and yet the pandemic stopped that experience. So you're right, now that it's come back, we have to grab it with both hands and help our musicians, because they were out of work for a long time, And now they're back working again, and we should support them in every way that we possibly can. Right?
Did you manage to negotiate a rider for your gig in Trinity? Did you have any requests?
Well, Dan, as you know, you get a free ticket. It's a bit like Electric Picnic. The lower down band, you don't get paid, but you get a free ticket. So we got a free pass into the whole ball. That's all we got. And then because I'm on the staff, there's kind of a common room the staff can use. So I've got to use it anyway, I suppose. But we were in there having a few drinks afterwards, so it wasn't too bad. But no, nothing else really, it must be said. We didn't get any special treatment.
Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking about this brilliant album with you, and your love for music and the Beatles is absolutely brilliant. And thank you again for joining us.
Thanks very much, guys. That was an absolute joy. And anytime you need me, I'll be always there for you. That's our second one. And the last one was brilliant fun as well. So I was happy when you reached out again. I was very happy to do it. So thanks very much for asking.
Cheers, Luke.
You're listening to The Big Album Show with Paul and Dan. Please remember to subscribe, hit like, and remember to follow us on our social media platforms at The Big Album Show.